I'm speaking with Julie Cole. I've had the pleasure of meeting her a few times, which is exciting. I love that I get to meet so many cool people. So here she is. She had a fall. So let's explain why your wrist. Yeah, c'est dommage. That means I'm so sad, I think, in French. C'est dommage.
And around my house, we say sob, cry, cry. Because one time we got a letter home from camp from one of the kids. And he was saying, I just want to come home. I'm sorry. And then he ended it with sob, cry, cry, and a picture of himself crying. So that's like our family hashtag. We're like sob, cry, cry all the time. Yes, I had a fall. So dumb. I was just on my driveway. It was icy. And I went down and I did my wrist in and my face. So this is why I'm not generally like dressed or like a glamour queen when I do podcasts anyway, but I just felt I should give a little background information as to why I look like this.
So the last time I fell,
do you do this regularly?
So no, okay. No. But I took Milo skating a couple weeks ago, and it was his first time like being on the ice.
Right.
And I used to figure skate when I was little, so I was like, "Oh, no problem. Like we'll go skating. I'm comfortable on skates." And so he obviously was falling, but he was really good at like getting back up and going. And one time he went to fall, and I held onto his jacket or something, and he pulled me down. My head snapped back, but I was able to catch my head before it hit the ice because I wasn't wearing a helmet.
Of course.
Didn't even think about it. Yeah. And after that, I was terrified. And my husband's like, "You're not getting back on the ice until you get a proper helmet." True. Because it happens so fast.
You know what? It is so interesting you said that because like literally I was on the ground. I'm like, how did I get here? Like, yeah, I was just down and, so fast. And then of course, like, honestly, total ridiculousness. Like I get up and I come inside and I'm like, oh, this hurts. First thing I do though is go to make sure I have no speaking engagements or media appearances this week before I check to see how I'm doing physically. And I'm like, oh, good. I only have podcasts and writing to do. Yeah. Because I have radio phase.
You're like, I just fell. Hold on. Let me check my schedule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or the other thing would be like, oh, is my phone broken? Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's so funny.
But you know what? I've been doing a little bit of unpacking around this fall, actually, because it really made me consider a few things, which was one, I was really embarrassed about the fall. And like, I just was like, I hope nobody saw me. I got up probably too fast. And I thought, what is that about? Like, why am I embarrassed? Mm-hmm. Like, I know people do, like kids get embarrassed, especially if they're in high school, if they do something, like if they have a fall or whatever. But I'm like, why do we do that as a culture? Like, why do we make people feel embarrassed or what's going on there? So there's that. And then the other thing is I've been like masking up a lot and wearing stuff because I don't want to see anyone to see my face. And it's because I feel like I look like I've been hit. And I feel like I'm carrying the shame around of somebody who's been hit. And then it made me think about how do women who are living in domestic violence, like I felt the shame and I'm like, why are they feeling shame? And yet I felt it and I'm not even living it. So I'm doing a lot of unpacking with what's going on with my face.
When I had my wisdom teeth removed, I bruise like a peach. Yeah. And I was yellow and like black and blue for so long. And I had the exact same feelings. Now, this was before people wore masks.
Right.
And I had the exact same feeling. I'd be walking around Walmart or something thinking like, oh my God, like, I wonder if people think
like, I'm okay. I'm not doing the help me sign. I'm good. I know, but it really made me think about women who are like, so a whole bunch of things. You know, you think about, like, I remember reading recently about a man who was at a party and he was at a restaurant and he was having a problem choking, like he was choking, and he went to the bathroom and died alone instead of asking for help because we get embarrassed, because we need help. What is going on, Renee?
Yeah. Okay. So that is actually very common with choking and also having an allergic reaction.
Oh, really?
Like people at a restaurant or something like that. And they start to have a reaction, like their throat is closing and they leave the restaurant or they go, like you said, go into the bathroom and like, cause they're embarrassed.
Right. And it's not like anyone, like I've seen people get hurt and I just go help them. Like, I don't think anything less of them. I'm like nobody does. So why do we do that to ourselves?
I don't know.
It's very odd.
It's like a weird human thing.
But then I was talking to a friend about it, and I was saying how like I want to cover up because my face, and he was just like, wow, I've just never like, I got hit at hockey or whatever, and I just walk around. And I was like, so you never worry that your face looks? And he's like, no. So I'm like, so this is a woman thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sure guys are like, sweet, I look like I play hockey.
I know. You can imagine how many times I've said, oh, you should see the other guy.
Yeah.
My kids roll their eyes constantly, every time.
I love that.
There we go. Okay.
Let's talk. Okay, the first question that I usually ask people who are mothers on the podcast is, what was your transition into motherhood like? Now, I know most of your kids are older. Most of our listeners have young children. Right. So this will be an interesting conversation for people to hear. So take us back to when you first became a mom, and what was that like for you? Where were you at in your life? Right. Were you expecting everything that happened, and so on? Right.
Okay. So I was actually at law school. I had spent a lot of time at school. I'd done my undergrad. I'd done a master's degree. And I met Daddy-O at grad school, and then he went on to work full time, and I went back to law school. And then we were like, hey, let's have a kid. And I wanted 4 kids. He's one of 5 kids. We always thought, we might like a bigger sized family. So then, we pulled the goalie, and I'm very lucky in that I get pregnant very easily. And so I got pregnant. And then I had my little guy, McGinnis, and I'm going to say something really, really, really annoying right now.
Okay.
I found it really easy.
Yeah.
I did.
With your first?
I did. I found it. He was very easy, but I have to also say that I had real issues with my milk, and he did reach failure to thrive. And so we had some feeding issues, but the problem, and I didn't know this at the time, is you think a baby will cry when they're hungry. Eventually they get too lethargic. So they don't actually cry. So he was getting weighed every day. And if I felt I was in such a place of privilege, because I can remember once when I was in grad school at NYU, I was living in New York City, and there was a news item that came out about this baby who had starved to death. And I was super judgy. And I was like, how could a mother, how could they not know? And honestly, if I hadn't been in a situation where my baby was getting weighed every day, or I was supported and I had been educated, my baby could have starved to death. So it was a real learning for me. But needless to say, he didn't cry a lot. But once we got him, feeding correctly and he was putting on weight, it was a very, very great experience for me. He, would come to law school with me. Like, I just baby wear him to class and stuff like that. So I had a really, really nice experience with him. My issue was that when he was 3 months old, I fell pregnant again right away. And I was a little shocked about that. And I ended up losing that baby. And I ended up then feeling really guilty, because I was like, by the time like I went for the ultrasound, now I want it. I had wrapped my head around having Irish twins. And then so after that loss, we were like, a month later, we're like, yeah, let's get pregnant again. And this is where I'm going to say the annoying thing is that, and it's so ridiculous, but I actually was happier with 2 because I felt like 1 was a little bit boring. I know that's so ridiculous. I know.
But I love this. I actually love this because so often we hear the opposite. Well, especially on this podcast, because that's not my experience. How old were you when you had your first?
My first, I was probably, I would have got married at like 27. I was probably like 28, 29.
Okay.
And then I had Posey on International Women's Day just after I turned 30, like 3 days after I turned 30. And they're 15 months apart. And in a way, like I then I had one 20 months later, like I packed them in tight and whatever. So it was busy and all that. But I do think in a way, like it was easier in that, like, you have to be like, Renee, you like people who have singletons, it's all on you. Whereas like my babies would just kind of putter around together and like go to the park and putter around together. And like, I never had to play with anyone. Like they had people to play with, right? Like, so in some ways, I mean, obviously I didn't sleep for 10 years. I was pushing around a triple stroller, blah, blah, blah. But in some ways, there were a lot of benefits and it made it easier for me.
What do you think there are things about your personality that made that kind of lifestyle easier for you? Like, for example, I didn't sleep last night and today I'm like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, are you able to function without sleep? Are you just like,
so yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, right? And I don't think there's any right personality or wrong personality or trait. I just like, if you don't have the capacity or like it's not your thing or you can't, or you get tired, like don't go and have 6 freaking kids. Like then you'd be an idiot. There's no right or wrong number of kids. I had a few things going for me. My babies were dead easy. I don't think I ever paced with a child. I never had a colicky baby. I never vomited through a pregnancy. If any of those things happened, I'd have been one and done. Like I could not bear being sick and I could not bear having a child who cried or even had a witching hour. And I had none of that. Wow. So that, that makes a huge impact. And obviously I have a high threshold for chaos, right? Like I don't get, having a messy house or getting like kids not being perfect or making perfect meals. Like I never put a whole lot of pressure on myself around that stuff. I did around their development and their education. And I've got a couple neurodiverse kids. So that's probably, really why. But yeah, I mean, you just got to do what works for you. And there's no right or wrong or perfect, but you certainly have to have a certain kind of temperament to be able to, do this kind of life and not go like, go crazy. Right.
How old is your youngest now?
So Finian is 13. So I am on easy street. Like, I've got 3 at university, 2 in high school, 1 at the end of grade 8, right? So it's, and for everyone who's listening and they say bigger kids, bigger problems, baloney, you're in the hard part. Like you're in the hard part. Like I drink my tea and it's still hot. Like I sit down and have dinner. I don't have crusts for lunch. I go to bed when I'm tired and they set their alarms to get up in the morning for school. Of course I get up with them, but you know what? They make their own lunches. They do their own laundry. You also, when you have a lot of them, and my friends with singletons really try hard to do this too, because they have to remind themselves, it's like, I need them to be independent. I need them to be able to do things for themselves. So I know a lot of my friends, Renee, like you, would be like, okay, I know it's easier for me to do it for him, but I'm not going to. I'm going to get him to do it. And it's going to take us longer to get out of the house because, short-term easy, long-term hard, all that stuff, right? But, when you have so many of them, you don't have a lot of choice around, creating that independence because you just can't put on 6 people's pairs of shoes every time you walk out of the house. I mean, I had 5 in car seats at once, Renee. Like it took me half an hour. Yeah.
Just buckling. Like I remember picking up Milo from daycare some days and I had to go get one of the teachers and be like, he won't, can you help me?
Did he do the arch? Did he do the back arch?
Oh yeah. I'd be like so embarrassed. Like I'm FaceTiming my husband in the car. Like he won't get in his car seat. Like I don't know what to do. Like the Timbits aren't working. Like teacher, can you please help me? And then of course he gets in for the teacher when they come over. But I can't imagine like 5 kids in a car seat. You'd have to leave like 2 hours early.
But you know what? It's funny because you do practical things. Like I bought a car that the only reason I bought this particular car was because they had seatbelt extenders, which meant the kids in boosters could do up their own seatbelts. And that was my sole purpose for buying that kind of vehicle because it meant 2 of the kids could do themselves up. And then I only had to do 3 up. So, I mean, these are the things that but it's funny. That reminds me, most hilarious story. So I'm taking my kids to swimming lessons. I've got Clancy's probably an infant. Chesapeake's like 17 months. The others are like 3, 5, and 6. So we go to swimming lessons. I got the double stroller, blah, blah, blah. I bring all the PJs so that after the swimming lessons, I can put them on in their PJs. And we run into a friend of my mom's, like, so a grandma age, and she's there with like her husband and her daughter and the daughter's husband. And there were one toddler who's going for swimming lessons. And, you know, I'd see them in swimming lessons, great catch up. And then my mom ran into her friend in the grocery store and she says, oh, it's so embarrassing. Every time we run into Julie, she's there with those 5 kids, putting them in swimming, and it takes 4 adults to do this one toddler.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it's all what you're used to. And honestly, like, because people are like, oh my God, 6, it's like, they did come one at a time, right? Like you do get used to it. And it's not like where you're just doing the do. Like kind of the thing, like you're already not sleeping. You're already got like this deep in diapers. You're already packing up loads of crap in the car whenever you go somewhere. So it doesn't get twice or 3 times or 4 times as hard. I lie. The second kid, I think people feel. But, you know.
That's what I've heard. What I've heard.
I loved having the second. But I think that is the hardest transition because I think a lot of people, you know, you think about what you gave your first and you want to get, and there's no way you're going to be able to give your second everything you gave your first. And then you feel bad for your first because suddenly you're cutting into their time. So I think you have to manage a lot of that. Oh, this is a completely different experience, but whatever.
So I was reading your book and you were talking about how eventually you left law after having, so I wanted you to talk about that experience. Like how many kids did you have at that time?
Right.
What made you decide to leave your career as a lawyer? And then how you got the idea to start Mabel's Labels.
Right.
Like what was the timeline of all that happening?
Yeah, for sure. So I did my articles while I was pregnant with my 3rd. And I think when Spencer was about, I must have been called just around the time they were born. And that was fun. So then what happened was around the time Spencer was born, Mac, my eldest, was about to turn 3 and we were noticing some stuff with him. He seemed to have some skills and he was losing them. And then, you know, I was kind of like, well, you know, lots of change, a sibling, now another sibling, and he is a boy. And, you know, I was kind of doing all that. But then my mom and my mother-in-law kind of sat me down and they're like, we're a little concerned about this guy. And I remember saying to them, you sat me down the day before my 3rd C-section. You know I'm having a baby tomorrow, right? And they're like, we know, but we need to have this conversation. I was like, okay, yeah, no, absolutely. And so then the week after I had the baby, I got, you know, a bunch of assessments done on my little guy, and he got a diagnosis of autism. And by that time, he was 3 years and 3 months. So at that point, I really just felt like I really needed to advocate for him. I wanted to set up a very intensive therapy program for him, wanted to set him up for success. I had a lot of reading to do. I needed to do a lot of research. And I just at that point was like, I don't think the traditional workforce is going to suit my life anymore. You know, like this is just not going to work. And, you know, I had already had the idea and been talking about the idea of Mabel's Labels with 3 girlfriends of mine. Actually, one's my sister, one is my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, and one actually is a friend from university who married my young uncle. So we were all friends and all relatives. And so when Matt got diagnosed, and everybody was kind of in the thick of babies and on mat leaves or going back and dropping kids at daycare, it was mayhem for everyone. And I was like, what do you guys think? Like, is now the time to try and bring this idea to fruition? And they were just like, yeah, let's do it. So we started Mabel's Labels. It'll be 20 years ago in March. And,
that's crazy.
Yeah. And we started, you know, making labels in my sister's basement till 2:00 in the morning. And then they'd be going to their traditional jobs or doing their mat leaves, or I'd get home and get up to my 3 kids at 6 a.m. and do the you want to talk about default parenting? Because also, like for me, I also love being the default parent. Like I love it. And I know I'm a freak. So, I think I'm just a bit controlling. Like I just like to know everything that's going on. I don't know what it is, but I just like it. But I also was very practical in that sense. Like we didn't know how our business was going to do. I needed Daddy-O to go out and be fully functional and bring home a good paycheck. I was spending $40,000 a year in therapy for my child with autism. I had 2 other kids. I was working in a basement at a business I didn't know would succeed. I had given up a lawyer's salary. So if I had to get up in the night, if I had to deal with sick kids, if I had to do all those things, I was more than happy to do it because I wanted to send him off in tip-top form to go and get the promotions. And he did. And he became a partner at a big firm and, was able to support us very well financially and emotionally through all of that. So yeah, I picked up a lot of stuff. That was my role. But eventually my business did well too. So there was that as well. So that was great. And then by the time my 5th kid turned 1, 3 kids too late, I got a full-time nanny. Again, 3 kids too late. Like, honestly, if you learn anything from me, get the help now. It's not worth it. Do not be the martyr. I was just doing too much. For years, Renee, I would get 3 hours sleep, get up and feed a baby, get 2 hours sleep. Total. But that was kind of my superpower too. I could get away with very little sleep. I couldn't do that now. Now I'm just like, nope.
It's a good example of like your family was in that specific situation. Like here were the family goals and everyone played their role and you made it work.
Yeah, exactly.
To be able to do what you wanted to do.
There's no one model that fits every family, right? I mean, you have, your partner has a big job. So you need to pick up a lot of the slack there. But then you're like, okay, but actually my career, my business is growing too. So what kind of supports can I put in place so that I can you have to adapt, right? And you probably didn't know 2 years ago what that was going to look like, but you have to be flexible. You have to adapt. You have to do what works for your family. And there's no one size fits all. And at the time, of course, I had the unique experience of having to fund this child's my child. If Mac never had autism, I don't know what it would have looked like, but we had to tailor our needs to suit, and I am very proud to say that this kid now is 23 and he just graduated from university. He's currently touring. He's out in Australia with his sister, and he's apparently, I just saw on Instagram that he's doing a week-long hike in the outback or something starting right now.
Oh my God.
So, it was all worth it.
Yeah. So if there are, a lot of my listeners have young children. And so I was thinking about things that I could ask you today. And one thing that I think would be extremely valuable is if somebody is in the position right now where their young child has received a diagnosis of autism, what would you say to them?
That's a really, really great question. So I'd say to them, the kid you had before the diagnosis is the exact same adorable, lovely child that you adore after the assessment. But, things have changed. And I think, for me, my sister described it as I had 5 minutes of denial, because people said, oh, maybe it's just like semantic pragmatic disorder. And I was like, I don't think that's it. Or maybe it's just a speech delay. I'm like, I don't think that. And then as soon as I got the autism diagnosis, I was like, you know what? Maybe it was semantic pragmatic disorder. That is my diagnosis. And I did that for about 5 minutes. And then I had a couple of days of grieving, where I was just worried. I was like, what does this mean for his future? I don't have a crystal ball. And quite frankly, I love my children. I love having 6 of them, but I want to be an empty nester. And, as a parent of a child who's neurodiverse or special needs, you always wonder, are they going to leave the nest? And, as much as we love our children, we want them gone eventually. We want them to be cat spears. We want them to fly. We want to give them roots and wings and them to go. So I worried about that. I wondered what that meant for my future. I wondered about the future of his siblings. And in a way, it's not why I had so many kids, but it was kind of a little benefit. I thought, not knowing what his future looked like, I thought there were lots of hands to share. There were lots of people that could share, the responsibility of having a brother who's neurodiverse. Again, that wasn't the reason I had them, but it would have been a lovely benefit. In the end, I didn't, need any of that. He's raised to be an independent fella, but those were the things that were going through my mind. And that's why I went through grief. And I think it's okay to grieve. But then after that grief, I just went into action. And, You know, I think the best thing you can do it's such a hard system to navigate, but try to find the resources. Talk to other parents. They are going to be your best. There are so many groups on Facebook. There are so many groups out there now. When I got this diagnosis 20 years ago, this was before social media. This was before I was going to like Autism Ontario parent support groups one Monday night a month. And, you know, that was what we got for support. So now there are a lot more resources out there. It's also a lot more common now, which is another curious thing. And a lot more kids getting diagnosed and a lot more cases of it. So, there's a little more attention. So I would say, check your resources, talk to other parents, access those resources, advocate. You go into that school, you go wherever you have to go and get the best for your kid and get on the waiting list for services. And in the meantime, if you can afford it, get some private therapy because you pay now or you pay later. I mean, beg, borrow, steal. If you're a parent, if you can remortgage the house, I mean, people would be like, don't tell people to remortgage the house. I'm like, that's what I would have done. Honestly, like, get the help now. If your parents have money and want to contribute, do all the training. Everybody in my family, all the grandparents had to get trained. They had to know what was on Mac's program. They had to know what skills we were working on. So when they were spending time with him, they knew what to tap into and what to work on. It was like, I was hardcore. It was hardcore.
Wow. How do you think his diagnosis and like growing up with all his siblings, how do you think it affected his siblings?
Right. Okay. So first of all, how it affected him. Okay. So it was incredibly beneficial for him because I mean, he had these, like, I had like Posey and Spencer and Jessamy. So he had these kids who were just pulling him into imaginative play all the time, which is a deficit. He was socialized constantly. I mean, he had bath time with his sisters. He had shared a bedroom. He like everything. He was engaged with peers constantly. And so that really helped with his language. So there are a lot of benefits for him in that they just touched on those deficits all the time. Also, it was a benefit for me because I couldn't let him off the hook. Like if everybody had little chores, if everybody had to clear their plates, it didn't allow me to spoil him or to be like, oh, well, I'll just cut him some slack because he has autism. Like it was like, Mac, you got to clear your plate. Everybody else is clearing their plate. You got to clear your plate, you know? And I've seen that with friends in the community and, you know, like I've got, you know, like I have friends with kids with Down syndrome or kids with autism. And I'm like, you're doing too much for them because now you're going to have a kid with Down syndrome and a spoiled brat. You know, nobody needs that, right? So it made me it didn't allow me to have set expectations. And a lot of those expectations matched what I had for his siblings. So that was good for me. I think for his siblings, they're incredibly accepting, empathetic, caring. They're the kids who are inclusive and help people out and they, you know, don't bully and aren't bystanders and speak up and that goes to all issues. Like they're super woke, you know, they call me out on stuff. They'll be like, Mom, we don't say that anymore for these reasons. I'm like, oh, excellent. Thank you. I'm getting educated constantly. And it was actually super cute because they were like little therapists. I remember we moved into a new house and I never fed Mac the answer. So, and leaving, you learn these techniques. So I wouldn't say to him when he came home from kindergarten, who did you play with at recess? Because he couldn't retrieve. So I'd say, did you play with Johnny or did you play with Sarah at recess? And he'd say, oh, Sarah. I'd be like, did you play? So I'd give him and/or, you know, and, the siblings caught on to that. And I remember once I said, Mac, I was going to feed a baby. I'm like, Mac, I need you to grab a spoon from the cabinet. And he went in the kitchen. He had no idea where it was. Posey ran into the kitchen. She was, Mac, do you think the spoon's in this drawer? Or do you think the spoon's in this drawer? And he's like, oh, this drawer. And I thought it was so funny that they also like learned some of the strategies and techniques that I was using. Just, you know, kids, they're like, you know, they learn from observation. That was something that Mac didn't do, right? His observational learning skills weren't that great. So I would have to explicitly be like, here's the garbage can, whereas the other kids would just know where it is because they've seen me use it, right? So there were so many interesting little things. So I mean, there were so many beautiful benefits for our family, and also with his autism diagnosis, it brought us into a really amazing community that's been a big part of our lives.
Do your kids now? Obviously, they're older. Like, you started this business, it's so successful, you're on TV all the time. Do they think what you do is cool? Like, what are their thoughts? And do they know that you left like a career in law?
Yeah.
Like, they understand that?
Yeah, look, for my kids, I mean, they've been, involved in, they've been, raised around Mabel's Labels, right? Like, they'll work there in the summers and they know that I'm off to Mabel's Labels. The funny one was Mac was, one time one of the kids was saying, Mom, when you started Mabel's Labels, he's like, and this was like literally not that long ago, like a few years ago. And we were like, leave it tonight. He's like, oh, I didn't know you started it. I knew you worked there. And Bosie's like, where have you been for the last 15 years? Like, dude, how asleep at the wheel are you? So we're like classic back. And so sometimes we do see the autism still, just things like that. But, it's just been a big part of their lives. And, they'll laugh because it's just been, if media comes to the house, I've got some kids will be like, sure, Mom, I'll do a segment. And some kids are like, yeah, no, I don't feel like doing it. Or no, I don't want to do an interview or whatever. And sometimes when I need them to, I don't mind saying, look, like most of the time they don't have to do things they don't want to do. But once in a while, I don't mind being like, do you guys like having a cottage? Do you guys like having this pool and, going to Australia to visit Oma? Because I might need your help because this is my job. So I actually have no problem, it's not constant or whatever. But once in a while, I'm like, dudes, I help you out. You need to help me out. Buck up and get in front of the camera for 30 seconds in the background. I have absolutely no problem doing that. So if any, I hope you don't either. Like, guys, this is it's a family thing. But of course day to day, it's not a thing, but they like to laugh that I'm like a D-list celebrity. They mostly just think I'm like a teen mom like everybody else is teen mom. And it's more their friends who are like, your mom's cool. And they're like, yeah, no, she's not. Right. But then they're cute. Like one of Jessamy's friends had done a project at high school about a woman she admires for her project. And she did me. And like, that's kind of cute. Or I'll get invited to speak at Career Day. And I think they're a little bit proud of that. They're like, don't embarrass us. But they're teens, but they're good teens. So I've gotten pretty good. So
before we started recording, you had mentioned that one of your kids still doesn't have a cell phone. I guess they're 13. I'm so curious because Milo's 4. So obviously I don't have to worry about this for a while, but I do think about it a lot. And it's probably because I spend so much time on social media and like, that's what I do. I can see the good, but I can also see the bad. And how do you navigate that? Or how did you navigate cell phones, social media, the internet with your kids?
So I probably gotten a little more slack with the younger ones than I was with the older ones. I mean, Posey even said one day, she's like, Ma, you've been asleep at the wheel for the last 3 years. You were great with us, but they get away with, but of course the older ones think the younger ones get away with everything. The younger ones don't think so. Yeah. They think the older ones had, it's always the way, right? But generally as a rule, it was when they start high school, when they graduate from grade 8, they get a phone if they can afford it. That's been kind of how it is. I'm not that mom who does tracking devices or anything like that. I don't really want to know where they are all the time. I think it's very important for teens to do things without being watched. That's how you learn and you problem solve. And, I think that's a good thing. They know if they get in a big trouble or anything really happens, they'll call me and we'll figure it out. It's no big deal. But, I don't need to know they're at the graveyard at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, hanging out with their friends, playing hide and seek or maybe drinking or I don't know what. That's what teenagers do, right? That's how they learn. And I want them to be able to problem solve stuff now because otherwise I might be problem solving their stuff forever. Today's problem solvers are tomorrow's leaders. Yeah. So they need the practice I don't want 30-year-olds asking me to solve all their problems for them. And I kind of feel that way with little ones too. Like, I don't want, if you have a kid in grade 6 and they got a cell phone and they're on a bike ride and they fall, like, they're going to call you and pick them up. I'd rather their brother throws them over the shoulder and carries them up the hill and dumps on the couch, or knocks on a neighbor's door and says, my brother fell. Can we use your phone to call my mom? I don't want to be the person to solve every problem for them. I want them to rely on friendly strangers. Once Posey and Spencer were off skiing alone, and they were probably 8 and 10. And one of them had a bad fall, and the other one did found a friendly stranger. Mom, can you stay with my sister? And then went and found a ski patrol, and then skied to the chalet and found us. And, so they learned to problem solve that stuff instead of calling me from some random hill and saying, Mom, I'm on this hill and so fell down. Like, I want them to figure that stuff out. So, people say, well, I need a phone. They need a phone in case of an emergency. And I see what those emergencies are. It's like, can you pick me up at the mall like 15 minutes later? Or
I forgot my running shoes.
Come bring me this, come bring me that. Or can I come home later? Like, those aren't emergencies. Like, you can figure that stuff out. Like, really, if there's an emergency, you'll get found. You'll get found.
You know what's crazy? Like, I always think about, because I grew up without a cell phone, without social media. And I remember, because I lived in Sudbury, I used to have tournaments, like volleyball tournaments and whatnot, when I was like 18, 17 in Toronto. So like, I would look at the directions before I left my house and be like, okay, this is, the 400 all the way down, exit here. And then if you got turned around or took a wrong turn, I would literally have to stop at a gas station and ask the guy, like, how do I get back on the 400?
That's what we did. We stopped at gas stations. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And nowadays, I'm sure people would be like,
I know.
That's crazy.
Remember the triptychs? Like, if you did a big trip, your family would go to the CAA, get the triptych, you'd have to flip it over to, we're at the end of the map. We got to get to the next map. Oh, I have to say, it's been brilliant. And as I do really love that my kids, if they are driving somewhere, that they can go on Google Maps. And I'm just like, I can fall asleep. They're like, I'm going to Queens to visit friends. I'm like, okay, good. It is an incredible peace of mind. The maps, they're not like, I remember being lost in Detroit when I was young. Like, oh my gosh, I ended up in the sketchy neighborhood in Chicago. I got turned around. Like, so funny.
Yeah. Thank you, Google Maps.
Yeah, for sure. But it is, things have changed. I think parents, again, have to do what they're comfortable with. There's no, hard and fast rules around it. I just actually sat down. I do have a 13-year-old who loves video games and loves the VR headset, loves. And, I just sat down with him the other day and actually read a study with an article with him about how, the impact of screen time. And he does have he's a neurodiverse guy. He's ADD and ADHD. And the impact of screen time is actually, even harder on these kids and more impactful. So we had a conversation around that. And, now we've decided he's going to, in his little agenda, write down what time he goes on his laptop to play Minecraft and then what time he logs off, just to make sure that we're keeping a handle on it. And I find, like, when you can pull them into the conversation and let them self-regulate, it makes a big difference, because they own it.
That, I just want to point out, instead of speaking to him and telling him what to do without any explanation, like, you spend way too much time on this video game, like, this is ridiculous, that's it, you're only using a half hour. It's like, look at this research I found. Let's talk about this. Like, maybe we can start keeping track, and you can see, like, when I use screen time this much, how do I feel? Or like involving them in their lives instead of just like dictating what to do.
I'm not being the mean mom cutting him off. I'm like the mom who loves you and wants you to do well and wants you to be healthy and feel good and be your best self. So, let's look at this, and what are the takeaways? What do you think? And you're absolutely right, Renee. Like, especially I think with teenagers, involving them in the conversation. It's funny too, because I'm on this like teens Facebook group, and somebody posted, "What's your teenager's curfew?" And all these people are saying what the curfews are. I'm like, well, I don't even use that kind of language. Like, why don't you just be like, what time do you think you're coming home tonight? And they'll say something reasonable. And you're like, great. Okay, we'll see you then. Like,
Or be flexible. Like, oh, well, we're going to a movie that happens to end at 11:30. So tonight, is it okay if I come home at midnight?
Why would you have
that's fine.
Like this is your curfew. And if you don't get in, you're grounded. Like, I've never grounded a kid. I don't think I've even really punished a kid. Like, if they mess up, we talk about it, they learn, and we move on. Like, why would people ground a kid? You want your kid to stay home all the time? Like, well, that makes no sense to me. Get out, do something.
Yeah, exactly. You're not learning anything like sitting at home.
Totally. And then, the other thing I think is really important when you have teens is like just trying to be that safe space so that they don't lie to you. Sometimes if a kid, like the youngest one fibs a little bit and it drives the other siblings crazy, I'm like, he fibs to you guys because he doesn't feel safe to tell you the truth because you guys will jump all over him. So make it a safe place for him to tell the truth. And I think so, like, I always think about that. If one of them, isn't completely honest with me, like, can I reflect on why that is? Like, what can I do to make that,
Yes. Yeah. I always, whenever people ask, like, what's your favorite thing about being a mom? It's always that I'm Milo's safe space. Like, that just feels so nice, right? Yeah. And he's only 4. Like, my husband is too. He's obsessed with my husband. Like, obsessed. So it's kind of nice because, like, my husband's at work often, so I'll do everything and it's fine. But if I'm not here, my husband, like, does everything. It's totally fine. But when we're both home, because we always do bedtime routine together, Milo, like, especially because I was away last week, I'm like, oh, mommy will take you to bed and read you a book. Like, I'm trying to give my husband a break here. And Milo's like, no, I want daddy. Fun. I want daddy. Like, he loves
That's so
my
funny.
husband.
You know what? It's so cute because my niece is like that. And she'll say, and they take turns. So my sister does it one night and then her husband does it the next night. So if she does, like, well, I want daddy, mom, it's my turn. I get to tuck you in tonight. She's, okay. So cute.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband's always like, why am I the chosen one? I'm like, I don't know, but I kind of like it. I always
laugh when parents are like, I'm so jealous. My child likes my husband more. I'm like, I would be so okay with that. I'm like, you got friends who like you. You don't need your 3-year-old being like, I love you the best. I'm like, go with it. Exactly. Do all the work.
And I can leave home and have zero issue. Yeah, right. Like, I can leave for like a few days. Like, I know Milo is so happy just being here with his dad, like, and vice versa.
That's amazing. I did not have that.
Yeah.
I did not have that.
No, because you were the default parent.
I did until I had to go away. I remember my mom, like, I never had kids, but I had my one daughter hated when I went away. And I didn't go away that much when they were younger, but, Mom 2.0 or like conferences, whatever. And my mom would come up every day and give her a $5 bill if she was a brave girl while mom was gone. I'm like, hey, if Nan wants to bribe her, I'm okay with that. It's not something we do, but, grandma, go for it.
Sometimes you got to just do what you got to do.
Funny.
Yeah, for sure. So the last question I'll ask you, your kids are older for the most part. They're not, under 10. What would you say was the hardest stage to parent and why?
Look, they're all just so different. I mean, from a like physical exhaustion state, like certainly, I mean, my kids, I had my 5th kid when my oldest was 6. And then I had my big 2-year gap and had one more. I had 6 C-sections. So that was tough. Like, I would come home and, it was very physically demanding. So from that standpoint, that of course was very, very trying and very, very difficult. But also like, when they got to the age where they were involved in everything, it was like, I had 6 in hockey. I remember my Saturdays were like, kids were in dance, they were in hockey, they were in, oh my gosh. So I was running around like crazy. I remember feeling like I should just have a bed at the hockey arena. So those were really busy times, right? Like when they're all in like school, like in grade school and, all their activities and stuff. And then high school can be tough too, because, you've got a lot of emotions. Again, my high schoolers are great. Like a lot of parents deal with mental health stuff then, especially through COVID. It's been really hard on these kids. I just think that with every stage, there's so much fun. And there's different challenges. And I don't have a favorite age or stage. I thought I was a baby guy. And then I was like, I thought I wouldn't like having teenagers. I love having teenagers. I love the energy. I love their opinions. I love a house like tonight. My 17-year-old is hosting a birthday party and all their friends are coming over and I'll have to stay upstairs. I love that too. And it'll be a mess tomorrow. I'm fine with it. I like being the house that they come to. So I've loved, and when you drop them off at university, it's the weirdest feeling ever. And it's really weird. Like you watch them walk away and you're like, what is going on?
Like they're just not in your house anymore.
That messes with your head for sure. But then you get used to that too. And then they come home, you're like, I'm ready for them to go back. Cause you adapt, right? Kids grow up and leave for a reason. Yeah. They grow up and leave for a reason. So, I've loved, and I will say, cause your listeners, I know it feels like it's going to be like this forever. It's not just, it is hard. I get it, but try to find the joy in the little things because you are going to blink. And I know everyone says that and you're going to be like, oh, this whole season, Mom, but you're not. Yeah, just enjoy.
I know I just had this, I gave this speech to my husband last night because Milo was on top of him during bedtime routine. And my husband was like, cause we're going away for a week to a resort. And my husband's like, this is going to be us in bed for 5 nights in a row. Like Milo just bear hugging my husband. And I'm like, you just wait. There's going to be a day where he doesn't want to hang out with us. He's going to be embarrassed to give you a hug in front of his friends. And we're going to miss that part of it. So I'm always mindful of that.
Honestly, the hockey, I remember it was my 5th time in the arena one day or something ridiculous. And I'm like, I will not complain because one day I'm going to have a Saturday and wish I was at the hockey arena cheering on. And I say this, my youngest daughter is in grade 12 now and I'm the trainer on her team. I'm on the bench. This weekend is our last hockey tournament of her life. And then when we finish up in March, the season, that is the last time I'm going to be on the trainer, on the bench as a trainer for one of my daughters. And that went fast. And that was special time. That was really fun. And it's going to be over. So I never, I just never say, oh, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Even driving Milo to school, I really enjoy it. Yeah. It's our little time. And then I get to bring him to his teachers. It's just nice to see the kids and everything. And then this morning, he always tries to tell me where to park. He's like, Mommy, there's a spot right here. And I'm like, how about this? How about this, Milo? I'm like, how about when you drive yourself to school, you can decide where to park? And I'm like, how old do you think you have to be before you can start driving yourself to school? And he's like, 5?
He's ready now. I think that's hilarious. He finds you a parking spot.
Oh yeah, because he always wants me to park on the other side of the school. But then if there's no spot, it's a one-way. So then you're screwed. Fun. So I'm always hesitant. And he's like, no, Mommy, park there. There's a spot there. I'm
love it. God, he's 4. Look out, Mama.
Yeah. Okay. So to finish off, can you tell us about your book, where people can find it and where they can find you online?
Okay. So of course, our website at Mabel's Labels is mabelslabels.com. You can find all my information at mabelslabels.com/Julie Cole. And my book is called Like a Mother, Birthing Businesses, Babies, and a Life Beyond Labels. And, that is all. It's so full of life hacks, mom hacks, all that good jazz. I hope you can pick it up on Amazon. If you, it's any of your favorite booksellers, just hop online and you can grab it there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. This was so fun.
What a fun chat. And maybe next time you see me, I won't look like this.
Yeah, we'll have a redo. We'll get all dressed up and makeup, hair. And I'm on a roll.